There we go. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. What a day, what a day. A new day in many ways, but at the same time, a way to look at and review what we've seen before. Brother Youssef, good to see you. How you doing, man? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Al. Thank you. How are you, sir?
Great. I'm well, man. I'm well. Thank you so much. So I just been stuck to media in the past 48 hours, wondering what was going to happen here in Twin Cities and around the country. So let's jump right in. What are your first impressions about what happened in St. Paul and Minneapolis here in Minnesota? And let's build out from there.
Well, let me back up for a minute first, because this is the first national election since George Floyd's murder, and the pledge of over $2 billion for equity, inclusion, diversity, whatever they want to call it, and all of the brave promises for massive change, which we are yet to see. And I think that to counterbalance that, we've heard the big lie, the lost cause, the phony attacks on critical race theory, and a lot of dog whistling from the right. And as a result, in Virginia, they attacked critical race theory. That was the Republican eventual winner in the governor's race. His primary campaign platform was critical race theory, which even I think school children realize is not taught in K-12 education, but people went for it anyhow. Interestingly enough, since the 1980s, New Jersey and Virginia have each held their statewide elections 1 year after the president has been elected, going all the way back to Herbert Walker Bush. And when a Republican is in the White House, they elect a Democrat. When a Democrat is in the White House, they elect a Republican. Now, this has been true since the 1980s. And yesterday, it was true in Virginia, but not true in New Jersey, where the Democratic governor was able, with a very slim lead, to maintain the state house. So it's not all bad news for the Democrats or a victory war dance for the Republicans. Locally, in Minneapolis, the citizens reelected the mayor. They voted against reform, at least immediate reform, in the police department. You have the most diverse city council in history. In St. Paul, the citizens voted a significant majority for rent control. Melvin Carter, who received 51% of the vote, the first time he ran for mayor, received 62% of the vote, because we have ranked choice voting, and voters are able to vote for up to 6 candidates yesterday. We also had interesting school board turnout. The two DFL teachers union candidates did not get elected in St. Paul, which was unusual, right? Because St. Paul is a DFL town. The teachers union and the DFL, it's a one-party town for all intents and purposes, carry a lot of sway. And also in Minneapolis, the mayor won the referendum, which makes for a stronger mayor system in Minneapolis, which is identical to the system in St. Paul, where the mayor has more power than the city council. And we've got 7 city council members in St. Paul, and in Minneapolis, I think 13. You've got a dozen plus. 13. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how those dynamics play out. Now, one other thing that was interesting is that the jury selection was completed in the Ahmaud Arbery trial, the brother who was jogging down in Georgia, and the 3 white men in a pickup truck murdered him. The defense attorney who was defending the 3 white candidates summarily rejected.
Not candidates, white accused.
Yeah.
Okay. not candidates.
Yeah, he did. I'm sorry, forgive me. I'm talking politics. The defendants. He summarily rejected 11 of the 12 black potential jurors, and even the judge said, even Ray Charles could see that this was racially motivated to eliminate any black people from the jury. But according to Georgia law, there's nothing he could do about it. Right. So they're going ahead, 11 white people and one black person on the jury, which is disappointing but not surprising. Really kind of unfortunate.
Even with the full alternates, 15 whites and one black. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but had 12 potential black jurors in the pool and rejected all of them summarily, and they don't have to give a reason. They can say, well, they have strong opinions, or, they're butt ugly, I don't want them in the jury. Mm-hmm. And that is basically what happened. Now, I was a head judge here in St. Paul, and the turnout in the precinct that I represented, just a few blocks from where I live, was so robust that we had to request additional ballots 3 times. Wow. And I think that some people have been locked in with the pandemic for a year and a half and don't want to go out. And other people have been locked in and have cabin fever and had to take any excuse to get out.
Sure.
So they turned up at the polls. So it was kind of a mixed bag, better than expected turnout for an off-year election. On the one hand, on the other hand, the dog whistles, the dog and pony show, critical race theory, the Trumpisms really brought the Republican base out. So I think it is a clear indication that the elected and appointed officials, as it said in your paper this week, take apathy for acceptance. And if you don't vote, that you got no choice but to go along with the program. Your vote is your voice, and if you don't vote, you have no voice. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that people who are impacted by the potential and the proposed policies that these candidates mouth, including the lies and the misinformation, need to show up and represent what's in the best interest of their community or their family or their future, our future. So kind of a mixed bag, but I was expecting more. We've had a tailwind behind us mm-hmm. since George Floyd's murder, and my hope was that people would take that to heart in terms of police reform, in terms of social justice, in terms of public service, and in terms of the voting franchise. And that was not exactly the case. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we have to pick up the pieces and put them back together and go forward from here.
So did you expect, Youssef, what was your prediction for the ballot question number 2 in Minneapolis? What did you hope for, and what did you expect?
Was that the one on
police?
Police creating a Department of Public Safety?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think there was a lot of misinformation out there, Alan. People thought that meant that they were going to fire the police, that there wouldn't be any police. And, as Black people, we have liberal hearts and conservative minds, mm-hmm. okay? Mm-hmm. So the vote in the Black community, more than half of the Black citizens in Minneapolis did not want to support question 2.
Right.
And we support public safety. We just don't want our sons and daughters to be, tried and executed on the sidewalk, okay, by the law enforcement community. And the mayor has proposed that he's going to pull a group together that will include proponents and opponents of question 2 and come up with a pathway for accountability, transparency, and reform in the city of Minneapolis. Meanwhile, here in the capital city of St. Paul, the chief of police announced last week that he would not seek another term when his first 6-year term expires next June, which was the cause of a great deal of consternation because the chief shows up at Rondo Days and the Jazz Festival and goes to Golden Time Coffee Shop in the Black community every day, attends any event in the black community that he's invited to. And when 5 officers stood by and watched a former police officer give a wood shampoo to a couple of men in his wife's bar and pizza joint, he fired him summarily. When a dog, here's an interesting story. There's a brother over on the east side of St. Paul who went to the chief's swearing in ceremony 5.5 years ago and went up and shook his hand and wished him well, and said, we want to work with the police, but we want it to be a real partnership. The next day, this brother was coming home from work, pulled up behind his apartment, and the police bum rushed his car, got him out, and then unhooked a police dog and sicked the dog on him. And the dog bit a chunk out of his leg big enough to put a softball in. And while the dog was spinning him around on the ground, another police officer with steel-toed shoes looked like he was trying to kick a 95-yard field goal and broke 3 of the boy's ribs and punctured his lungs while he was on the ground, clearly unarmed and hollering for help to get this dog off of him. And the city settled with him for $2 million. And his lawyer said, if we go to court, you can get twice that. And he said, look, I don't want to create any problems, and asked the police not to release the video because he didn't want to have people in the streets as a result of what happened to him. Right. Decent brother. Right. Okay. And the chief fired the cop who kicked him and demoted the one who
put the dog on him.
Was supposed to be handling the canine. And the one who lost his job went to mediation and was rehired, and subsequently, because of civil rights charges, wound up in jail. Okay. So this is a chief who has expressed a willingness to meet and greet and dialogue with the community, and who was willing to listen, willing to consider, and was I think, a fair person who was reform-minded. So his leaving was of concern, particularly with regard to the mayor's race, because the perception was that the chief was not being supported by the mayor, who wanted other initiatives in place with some of the money earmarked for the police department, and would not allow the police department to fully staff up to its minimum, which is the same challenge that Arredondo has in Minneapolis, with 1 out of every 4 police officers resigning, retiring, or leaving the force and going somewhere else. So police reform is the only issue that appears to still be on the front burner, although with mixed results, because people think defund the police means get rid of them and hire gang members or social workers to go out and deal with crime. But there is a more than a kernel of truth in the fact that the police are used to sweep up any kind of disturbance or disruption or civil unrest or domestic abuse or mental health issues. And, Ronald Reagan let everybody out of mental institutions across the country, which created a lot of overtime for the police department. And I think to show their gratitude, they joined Mr. Reagan's party. But there is truth to the fact that the police are not licensed or trained or educated and equipped to deal with every emergency that comes up. And we've seen the militarization of the police departments and law enforcement across the country, which has led to a further erosion of the confidence on the part of the general public in law enforcement. And what happened to the brother in Ferguson, Missouri, to Eric Garner in New York City selling individual cigarettes, which is a $25 misdemeanor fine that cost him his life. When that happens somewhere, it happens everywhere. And you throw in Philando Castile, what was the brother's name, was checking on his girlfriend in the ambulance. Jamal Clark.
Yeah, down
you look at the young boy up in Brooklyn Center who had the air freshener, the Christmas tree hanging from the rearview mirror. And when that happens in one vicinity, it tends to cascade and reflect police officers across the country. And, the police, I think, are only now coming to the realization that what they do not only affects them, it affects everybody who looks like them or who wears that badge. And I think it's not so much that there's different kind of behavior. It is so much that we got 17-year-old girls with cell phones with video capacity who are for 8 minutes and 46 seconds filming or videotaping what's happening to George Floyd while a cop has his knee on his neck and presses his hand inside his pocket against his thigh, which doubles the pressure on the jugular vein of the person on the ground whose neck he's kneeling on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
documentation.
Malcolm would say the chickens are coming home to roost. And
yeah.
In terms of recommendations, there's a group of Black women in Minneapolis that I would encourage you to interview or have on the program sometime, who are the mothers of the victims of senseless gun violence. And they've come up with a program with 5 policy recommendations. And a lot of the people who are out there biting the microphone shouting racism have not spoken to these women to ask them what their recommendations are. Right. And Angela Myers, the president of the Minneapolis NAACP, has been in dialogue with them and has been promoting the 5 recommendations that they've made, which are all excellent in terms of strengthening background checks, reducing automatic immunity for police officers from any type of liability for actions that they engage in that result in the loss of life or extreme physical harm to citizens. And they have very conscientiously looked at all the laws, all the policies, and have said, as the mothers of innocent victims who've lost their lives, either at the hands of the police or through senseless violence, we can't have these 3, 5, 7, 10, 12-year-old kids being shot at the dining room table doing their homework, right, or lying in the bed or eating kitchen dinner. That's unacceptable. Yeah. And we have too many of these incidents that go unaccounted for, where nobody has come forward and said, I hope God will forgive me. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to be accountable for it.
Or where somebody else who knows who did it won't come forward. That's the other part. Yeah.
We had 400 people at a house party and more than 100 shots fired on Victoria and Selby, right in the heart of the hood in the capital city, and nobody saw nothing.
Right.
No description of the getaway car, no description of the culprits, no description of anything except people fleeing like cockroaches when the light comes on. And 400 people at a house party. What's wrong with this picture?
So it shows kind of the spectrum of the challenge. On the one hand, you have the hope and the idealistic zeal and enthusiasm of the, I think, Black Lives Matter centered initiative that was able to put together through color change and other operations this ideation of big change in what law enforcement is. Maybe unfortunately they settled on a narrative that disserved the program, but maybe not. People were shocked to hear defund the police. Bold language, bold statement, and people were unapologetic. And then when they were questioned about it, they said, don't get stuck on the words. This is getting your attention. Let us have a reasoned discussion on what and how public safety is and can be delivered and serviced, right? So that's
and Al, I blame the majority culture media because they were at the head of the line in terms of misinformation.
Sure.
And the suspicion that a lot of decent people had that what was being called for was eliminate the police, fire them, get rid of them.
Yeah.
And the plans for what we were going to do on the other side of the election were thin, at least because a judge threw out the language in Minneapolis, and the city council at the 11th hour had to come up with new language that people were still not entirely engaged with, for what exactly, the language in the referendum meant. And in St. Paul, we saw the same level of intensity on the part of the Chamber of Commerce, the landlords, and others who fought unsuccessfully against rent control. And I think that people across the city in St. Paul supported some form of rent control, and the city council does have the ability to massage and tweak it, now that the referendum has been successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that same categories of possibility existed in Minneapolis, but people were reluctant to write a blind check and go along with the language. And I think it was a language barrier from the very beginning, both for the title and for the language that appeared on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, we now have Mayor Frey and his pathway to accountability and reform and whatever else can come out of it. And I think that the proposals will be proportional to the representation on the group that participates in making the recommendations. And he has indicated that he will encourage people from all sides of this debate, because it wasn't really a dialogue, to come to the table and help shape whatever the path forward is. And even Arredondo, the African-American chief of police in Minneapolis, came out at the 11th hour and encouraged people not to vote for question 2, which, people wondered, was he overstepping his bounds? Was he within his right? And, he's the head of the Minneapolis Police Department, so the buck stops with him. And you and I have known Arredondo for many years.
Yep.
And have much respect and love for the brother from
the family. That's right.
From his base on Plymouth Avenue in the heart of the hood, where they deposited him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we either don't give the voters enough credit or we give them too much, and I'm not sure how we balance that in the future.
Where I was going in the comment I was making, Youssef, is that let's look at that spectrum of both challenges and opportunities in our community, things that seem to be contradictory or paradoxical, existing in the same place at the same time. On the one hand, there's this wonderful, marvelous, I think, educated energy by young zealots.
Right.
And that's not zealot in a negative sense, but, people that are energetic.
They're very passionate. Very passionate.
Right. And so they want, and they believe that they have the tools to move the system to reimagine what public safety is and how policing can be done. And so they are creating this argument about recognizing that a lot of people that are sworn officers, as you said, are not trained psychologists, therapists. They're not trained healthcare providers, right?
Yeah.
And so why have we dumped all of those responsibilities on them in a way that overwhelms them and makes them prone to use what they do know, and that's brute force as police training to manage situations rather than compassion, understanding, empathy, and things like that. So that's
Al, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a police officer, and he said their mantra is ask them, tell them, make them. Okay, and that's basically their modus operandi. They're going to ask you to do something. They're going to tell you to do something, and then here comes the knuckle draggers. Okay.
Yep.
And that's not the way to resolve all of the issues that individuals in crisis in our community face.
So you have that group, and then you have that group fueled by all of the anger and frustration over the public execution of George Floyd, and then national global attention to this history, not only here but globally, but nationally, of police repression, suppression, brutality, police managing Black people rather than serving Black people.
Well, and with complete immunity.
Yeah, and with immunity, right? Yeah. As an expectation of what their job is. And so
Derek Chauvin was an aberration, completely out of the norm. Okay, but a cop would be charged, tried, and convicted.
Right.
Okay. And looking nonchalant the whole while, like he was on a coffee break. Okay.
Like he didn't care.
George Floyd said, "I can't breathe," and he said, "If you can talk, you can breathe. Keep your mouth shut." You know? And his own officers said, "Should we roll him over? Should we check his pulse?" There's a white girl there who is a paramedic,
Right.
who's saying, my God, take the man's pulse, and the man is urinating on the ground as he's dying, and the pee is running down to the gutter and down the street to the sewer, and he's still got his knee on his neck after the boy is unconscious and comatose. It's inexcusable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the world reacted as it should, and that has fueled this energy to question
and
what
excuse
policing
me,
is. Go ahead.
excuse me for interrupting.
Go ahead. No.
But a lot of people, especially some of our white brothers and sisters, believe, well, Derek Chauvin got convicted. I guess that's all we need. There's nothing more that we need to do. We've set an example. We've sent a message. We've fired a shot across the bow, and now somehow magically through osmosis, everything for the past 300 years is going to be all right. Okay, that ain't happening.
No, not at all. Not at all. And we know better. We've been here before. So there's that scenario. Alongside it is what you talked about of at the other spectrum. When we kill each other in our neighborhoods, we have a problem telling and identifying the murderers in our household, right? And so we leave ourselves and our communities, our parents and sisters and brothers and neighbors further victimized by shielding through our silence those perpetrators. And at some level, we are making excuses for the perpetrator or for the defectiveness in that human being. But that defect or deficiency, whatever you want to call it, is toxic and has the chance or the opportunity to hurt more people. So we have to deal with that. So our community is in between, number one, recognizing that the conditions that created the deficiency in these individuals, broken individuals, are not of the making of individuals, but they are the result of that. But can you excuse their behavior if their behavior is killing my son, killing my daughter, killing me? Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. Destroying my property, absolutely not. Robbing me, absolutely not. And so it boils down to me, Youssef, in figuring out how we determine that justice and public safety are our responsibility, that we have to be accountable and responsible. We have to name the situations that we're talking about and also name the solutions. We have to have ownership of the solution-making process. That's what I think. And I think that people that voted for the so-called defund the police initiative who lost should not see themselves as having lost. They should see this as the result of this round of the discussion. Yeah. What they have set in motion is something that cannot be stopped. And what is in motion, from my point of view, is an examination of what it means to have compassion and to be equitable and to be, I think, conscientious and truthful, ethical in the dispensation of public service and for the public good. An examination and a call for the end of shortcuts and of shorthand thinking, call it white racism, that allows the system to be dismissive of our existence as human beings and therefore making it allowable for us to be killed willy-nilly when they feel like it. That's where I think we are. So what's the solution? Well, let me share my screen here. I think the solution is unfolding as we speak. And these events are a reflection of the solution, because even though Jacob Fry and with question 1 and question 2 kind of solidified leadership, executive authority in the city, protected the city, the office, from the removal of his police department authority. Even though that's happened in this election, the 43% who challenged the existing arrangement are not going away and should not go away. They should not feel they lost. They should say, this is a struggle, and we're going to continue to struggle, because our aim is not so much winning, but changing. And that's humanizing this process and making it responsible and responsive to ordinary people in our community. Let me do the screen share and see what you think. I sent this to you, I believe. Let's see. Hold on. I sent you a copy of the paper that's coming out Monday. Oh, here it is. And let me know if you see if your screen shows up with a copy of the paper of Insight.
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm not sure. And I should be sharing a screen here. Hold on.
Well, I think you just need to pull it up on yours, right?
Yeah. Share. Okay. It says I'm sharing. The question is,
I just have a split screen with you on one side and me on the other.
okay, yeah. So I'm not sure how I'm not making this share work, but I have up the front page of Monday's Insight News, and it has 8 winners of the Minneapolis City Council race. All 8 happen to be people of color, and the caption on it is "the majority."
Yeah.
This is a new arena where of the 13 city council members, 8 are people of color. It's a different dynamic. It's a new day. And what do you think it means for the management of a billion-dollar enterprise called the city of Minneapolis, and the budgets and the decision of how money is going to be spent, allocated, which tracks it'll go down, who gets contracts with the city, et cetera. So I think we're at a pivotal point in Twin Cities, and particularly in Minneapolis, with this election. I'm happy that to say for the first time, we've got a majority of people of color running the city government, the city council for the city of Minneapolis. What do you think about that?
I am cautiously optimistic, Al, and I'll tell you why. Whenever a person of color has the privilege of serving in a policy-making capacity, I have very high expectations, because you and I and people like us understand very clearly who we are, where we came from, how we got to where we're at, and what we still must be and do. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the same expectation that I have for anybody that looks like us, who's in a position of responsibility or a position of power. And public policy is one of the most powerful positions out there. At the same time, Reverend Sharpton was fond of saying, everybody who is skinfolk ain't necessarily kinfolk. Okay?
Right.
And so sometimes we are disappointed when people are a little timid or a little gun shy, maybe that's the wrong term, are a little reluctant to really step forward and advocate. You know, like Barack Obama was sort of darned if he did and darned if he didn't. You know, he didn't want to do anything that was too black because he didn't want people to say he was only looking out for black interest. And at the same time, when he messed up, we were saying that, look at what that half white boy did. Okay. So it's a tremendous and an awesome responsibility. It's also a privilege. And so when I say I'm cautiously optimistic, I have very high expectations, and I think we should, okay, because those people need look no further than their parents, their grandparents, their siblings, to understand that no other group of people has not only survived but developed and demonstrated the resilience that exists within communities of color and low-income communities. Okay, I mean, it's surviving with less, doing more with less. Look at the nonprofits in our community versus the ones uptown, you know, that raise millions of dollars, and ours are, you know, operating on yesterday's day-old bread handouts, etc. So I have very high expectations, and I think the fact that 8 of the 13 members of the Minneapolis City Council makes those high expectations not only necessary, but realistic. Okay. Yep. Because I can recall chief of police going before the Minneapolis City Council and saying, let's put the police precinct up on Broadway. And a council member saying, why not on Plymouth? And the chief saying, niggers don't vote. Okay. And he got suspended for a week, I can recall city council members who normally have the privilege, if something has an impact in their ward and they vote against it, there's kind of an aldermanic courtesy because everybody else will go along with the program. And I remember when Van White became the first African-American member of the Minneapolis City Council, and something affected the Fifth Ward. He was sort of ceremonially, and then Sharon in the Eighth Ward, when they would express reservations or concerns, and the other 12 members would just roll over them like they were invisible. So and I'm going to talk out of school here, but when I served in a cabinet or on a legislative task force or for the superintendent or for a foundation or wherever I was at, and there were other people who looked like me at the table, and one of them raised an issue and somebody went, nah, let's move the agenda. I would say, excuse me, and I would rephrase the question and put it right back on the table, and after doing that 5 or 6 times, the other person of color would say, I saw what you did there. I'm going to have to start doing that too, because they're trying to jam you up too, and you there all alone, fighting for the peoples. Okay. So I expect that they will support and respect one another, and that if the proposals that one member makes don't quite reach the bar, that they will work with that person and help them raise their performance and their proposals to a level. They're not going to pass anything that's only going to benefit Black people. We know that in the legislature. We know it in the city council. We know it on the county commission. So what you have to do is identify how proposals are going to benefit mutually all of the constituents in the public. Okay. And here's how it's going to help Northeast Minneapolis. Here's how it's going to help South Minneapolis, Southwest Minneapolis. Here's how it's going to help the university community. Then you can state your case. But if you say, I want to do this just for me, no, people are going to poo-poo you. And that's not how the game is played. Okay.
Are you seeing my screen yet, or are you still seeing me and you?
I'm sorry.
Are you getting my screen share yet?
Just the two of us.
Okay.
Just you on one half, me on the other.
Got it. Okay.
So I hope that they will educate, support, and lift one another, because I don't expect all 8 of them to be a monolith or to blindly, when Clarence Thomas was nominated for the Supreme Court, somebody came up to me and said, aren't you proud that there's going to be a colored person put on the, and I had to put my hands in my pocket so I didn't slap this person, okay? Because like I said, Brother Sharpton said, everybody that's kinfolk ain't skinfolk, okay? And everybody who looks like us, who talk like us, who dress like us, may not necessarily have our best interests at heart. Now, the Institute for Black Education in Washington, D.C. said the following, that basically people in our community are categorized among 4 groups. First are the people who understand what time it is and are prepared to commit their lives to forward progress and change and liberation for our community. Second are the people who have a pretty good understanding and a clear picture of where we're at, but they consider anything they do as an individual to be self-sacrificing or extra personal, and only if they get a raise or get their picture in the paper or, the big man pats them on the back, will they sort of tiptoe in that direction. The third category are the majority of people in our community. They're low income, they have marginal educations or miseducations at best. They live from hand to mouth. They have a lot of mother wit and folk wisdom, but for them, navigating the perils and the stress of daily life and feeding and keeping their children healthy and warm and safe is a major accomplishment. And fourth, there are individuals in every community, including ours, who are opposed to our forward progress, in part because they may benefit from it. And these are criminals, thugs, people in the underground economy, predators, people who break in people's houses and steal their stuff and hawk it. And so those of us who consider ourselves members of the first group have a job. Organize the first group, educate and convince the second group, okay, bring the third group up to speed and remove from the path of our forward progress the fourth group. So if people are firing guns and shooting indiscriminately, like we had 16 people shot in a nightclub a half block from the Civic Center in downtown St. Paul, okay? Unacceptable, Al, unacceptable. And those people need to go to court, need to be accountable, and need to be punished for that. There's no reason that the other 14 people who had absolutely nothing to do with the beef between these two brothers, okay, had to get shot or killed. Beautiful young woman, innocent bystander, was killed. So organize the first group, convince the second, educate the third, and remove from the path of our forward progress those people who self-identify in the fourth group. And whether it's through public policy or shame or avoidance, Yusuf's grandma said, when you're in the presence of a fool, remove yourself, or there will be two of them. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And we need to have absolutely nothing to do with these people and let them know in no uncertain terms that they're not welcomed, valued, or respected. Okay. And that if they practice that kind of negative, destructive behavior that reflects self-hatred, that we're going to pick up the phone and call and report them. Okay? And say, this is not in the best interest of our community. Will the authorities please come out here and deal with this person? Okay. They're stealing cars, they're firing their guns, and see, when I was a child, if somebody broke into somebody's house, the neighbors would say, don't call the police because they'll be harder on them than the crime really warrants. Okay. That's old school. Okay. That don't pass anymore because it ain't about calling people names or playing the dozens. It's about hurting people, maiming people, disfiguring people, destroying people's livelihood. Okay.
It's about terrorizing people. Because
it's terrorism.
It's terror. Yeah.
It's terrorism.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is terrorizing. So, each of us has a responsibility to leave our community more beautiful than it was when we inherited it. Not when we're gone and people can say something nice about us. Okay. Do it on this side of the grave. Okay. We have that responsibility. Not now. Old folks used to say, right now. Okay. and that's what we have to do. We have to be responsible. Okay. Because no one respects people who are irresponsible or who look the other way or didn't, the three monkeys didn't see, didn't hear, didn't say nothing. That does not make you a hero. That makes you part of the problem, not part of the solution. And and Hakeem Madhubuti, formerly Don Lee, used to say, the best teachers seldom teach, they bees and they do's. Okay. And that's what we need to be about, and
that's how we teach.
I was invited to give a speech on Father's Day, and the theme was, we love our sons and we raise our daughters. Okay. When our sons go astray, they're just boys being boys. Okay. When the girls go astray or somebody tries to harm them, baby, where's my shotgun? We got to jump on this immediately. Okay. And we need to raise our sons and our daughters as responsible, proud, upstanding, resilient assets in our community, because we have too many folks in that fourth category who are liabilities, okay, against the future. And anytime more young people are going to prison, into criminal justice, probations, the workhouse, than are going into higher education or technical school or to trade unions or apprenticeship, that's an indictment against the future of our community, Al. And you can look at any of the social statistics, whether it's why do we have the largest achievement gap in the country between free and reduced price lunch black kids and middle-class white kids. And when you look at the college admissions at the University of Minnesota, Sam Myers, Dr. Samuel Myers, the Roy Wilkins chairholder at the university, an economist, demonstrated that if you're looking at steps, the highest step of achievement, Black students who come from homes that make more than $50,000 a year and graduate from high school have a lower entrance rate into four-year institutions than white people who come from the lowest economic spectrum. Okay, so the fact that you and I are self-sufficient, working professionals who volunteer, who are engaged civically, is not a guarantee that our children are going to get a free ride or smooth sailing. Okay, we got to advocate for our kids as hard as the welfare mother does in public housing projects and family housing. And when you look at those steps, why is it that the best and brightest in our community are on a lower percentage step than the least of the white community? When you look at home ownership, why are the home ownership rates for us today lower than they were in Mississippi in the 1950s? When you look at healthcare, when you look at all of the social quality of life indicators, why are we on the bottom tier? Why are kids in special education classes in the public schools scoring higher on the Minnesota Comprehensive Achievement Tests than Black kids who are not in special education, but are in public schools? What's wrong with this picture? Yeah. Okay. And what responsibility do each of us have to contribute to correcting, revising, reforming, and changing it? That's what we have to do.
And I think part of the process is establishing the protocols of living in community and in your household that keep ourselves and our children and family and neighbors focused on productivity and accountability, on ethical living, and on benefiting the community as you benefit your own household, having a mind to do that. But, all the things you described, Yusef, have been around and remain, right? And so the question is, what will change and what has changed? What are we changing right now that will destroy that legacy, that history of disadvantage and of marginalization? How do we begin to create a Afrocentric or community-centric analysis that puts us on the solution side of the equation, not simply as the product of disparities? And back to the Minneapolis City Council, the disparities exist because of public policy, and public policy supported advantage for some and disadvantage for others. I say that in the area of the social arena and political and business life, too often we get the problem or portrayed as the problem, and white people get the money. That they've got a system, a process for making money on our misery. And so there's no incentive to end misery. And if misery in our community is going to be ended, I believe it'll be ended by us. And it means that we've got to be in a position to affect, to change, to direct public policy. You talked about the new majority on the City Council of Minneapolis not likely doing things that support just Blacks. My counter to that, Yusef, I think you're right, is that at some point in time, we got to change the narrative, shift the conversation to say that when we deal with things that uplift and solve and create solutions for Black people, that in itself.
I think we're saying the same thing.
We are. Okay. And I think we have to create that narrative out in the public so that stands against the white whiplash, the white dog whistle right now. The big question about
I think we are saying the same thing, and I'm not opposed to balancing the scales, because where have we seen all that support and all that money and all those resources and all of that, everything else go? It's gone to communities other than those most in need. So we need equity, and equity doesn't mean we're going to spend the same amount of money in Southwest Minneapolis as we spend on the North Side. It means we're going to attach whatever is necessary to address those issues in both of those communities. Okay. And it is not necessary to spend 3 or 4 or 5 times as much in Southwest Minneapolis as we spend on the north side to improve the quality of life. Okay. And that's parks, that's streets, that's potholes, that's healthcare, that's chemical health, that's economic development, business support, all of the things that we've done for everybody but those who have had the least attention paid to them. So in identifying priorities, we've got to look at what are some of the major and critical needs that will be most helpful in the African-American community, but that will not exclusively support that community, but will also help poor white folks over Northeast and will be of assistance to other people in need. Because, we got senior citizens, we got grandmothers, trying to stay in their home. We've got people. Why is it that 85% of the affordable housing is in our community or the first tier of suburbs? Okay. Grandma Wigglesby need to be able to live up in wherever in the world she lives when grandpa dies and she's left with the homestead and can't afford to maintain it. Why should she have to come to Ebenezer or to one of the high rises on Olson Highway or somewhere else because that's the only place that we have affordable housing for senior citizens? Right. And whether she lives in Edina or whether she lives on the north side, wherever she lives, we need to have those options available throughout the metropolitan area, because when all of them come in here, that eliminates the choices for people that live right in this neighborhood. Okay. So what are the most pressing needs and challenges? And we fund leadership development, youth development, career-oriented programs for everybody's children, but who? Okay. Is it because our kids are supposed to learn how to make ashtrays and shoe shine kits and go to reform school? Is that all they're good for? So that guards can have jobs at Stillwater and Lina Lakes and, the workhouse poor farm, whatever it is out there near Lake Minnetonka. Chaska, damn near. So I think it's both and. It's not one or the other, because it has been one or the other for more than 100 years. And it's been, y'all better get whatever you can, because I got mine, y'all got to get your own. Okay.
Well, my call to the young progressives is one that is cushioned by applause, right? And that wishes them well as they move into the sphere of accountability and of stewardship. And my call to those of us who see ourselves as legacy leaders, workers, pillars in community, is that we simply remain open, committed to the visions that brought us this far, and committed to both sharing and embracing the new beneficial energy that the progressive voice means. Our job is to put things in context and to link what has happened to explain the reality of the now in a way that gives us all clarity in pursuit of the future that we have to be co-creators of. That's what I think. Yusef, we're out of time. Good hour, man. Good conversation. Always great to talk to you.
Hey,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invite. My pleasure. And remember, if we can't self-criticize, we can't self-correct.
There we go.
Okay. God bless.
I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state
for one way. Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We had enough
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is the proclamation.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. You better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough. We've had enough of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough. All the money you're making. We've had enough. No more life gets taken. We've had enough. This is the proclamation. We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice. We've had enough. Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price. We've had enough. Philando, Breonna, George Floyd. What? We've had enough. So many.